President Eisenhower gave what today we should look at as the most important speech in American history, where he warned Americans against the emergence of a military-industrial complex that would transform America into an imperium abroad and a national security state at home, and that would bankrupt the American middle class. They have the ultimate power to turn us into slaves. And, if they shut down your food supply, they throw you out of your home, they starve your children. If you say something they don't like, that's the end. So, and every power that government takes, it will, the rule is it will ultimately be abused to the maximum extent feasible. And the other rule is that nobody ever complied their way out of totalitarianism. And, and Bitcoin to me, I started looking at that and saying, here is transactional freedom is critical. And Bitcoin is the answer to that because nobody controls it.
Welcome to a thought-provoking journey with RFK, a U.S. presidential candidate exploring America's health, democracy, and the future of freedom. In today's episode, we delve deep into the evolving role of technology in society and the controversial topics surrounding digital currencies like Bitcoin. From healthcare woes to the power of Bitcoin in safeguarding transactional freedom, join us as we unpack the challenges facing the nation and the potential pathways to a better tomorrow.
We have the highest chronic disease burden of any country in the world. CDC said the average person who died from COVID in America had 3.8 chronic diseases. So they had obesity, they had asthma, they had diabetes, and something else. And we need to end that to get our medical costs down. We pay more per capita, 2 or 3 or 4 times more than European countries in our country, and we have the worst health outcomes. So I think we're 79th in the world in health outcomes. We're behind Mongolia, Nicaragua, Cuba, Costa Rica, and it's all because of chronic disease. We have smart doctors here. We have great access to medical care. But we have this terrible chronic disease epidemic. We need to get rid of it, and it's debilitating the whole generation of kids. Well, when I was a kid, 1 in 10,000 people in my generation, 69-year-old men, had autism. Today, 1 in 34. Those are kids who, are never going to have a job. They're never going to pay taxes. I'm talking about full-blown autism. They're never going to write a poem. They're never going to play baseball. They're never going to, go out on a date. They're not going to serve in our military. And, they are become this huge economic drag for their families, their careers, et cetera. The cost of autism alone by 2030, according to a recent study by Weiler and Blaxall, is going to be $1 trillion a year just for that. We need to end that, and we can do it, and we can do it very, very quickly.
You've referred a few times now to when you were a kid. I don't know America from when you were a kid. I only know it from the last 20 years when I've been coming here. I still love the place, but how has the country lost its way so much?
How did it lose its way?
Yeah, on so many issues.
Well, 3 days before my uncle took the oath of office, President Eisenhower gave what today we should look at as the most important speech in American history, where he warned Americans against the emergence of a military-industrial complex that would transform America into an imperium abroad and a national security state at home, and that would bankrupt the American middle class with expenses. And, my uncle spent 1,000 days in office at war with his own military-industrial complex, keeping the country out of war. He didn't send a single combat troop abroad to die during his presidency. And, he ordered all 16,000 advisors home from Vietnam 30 days before he was murdered. And a week after that, President Johnson, the incoming president, remanded that order and sent 250,000 troops over. And Nixon then sent 500,000 over, and 56,000 never came back, and we killed 1 million of them. My cousin was killed there, George Skakel, but my father ran against the war in '68, when he won the Democratic primary. Martin Luther King had become a peace activist earlier that year, and he was killed 2 months before my father. And those traumas, and plus the Vietnam War itself, and 9/11 and COVID, each one of those traumas pushed us down that road about which Eisenhower had warned us, which is turning America into a military-industrial complex, destroying our democracy. And today, we're living in the world that he warned us about, which is our democracy has become like a Hollywood stage set. It's the kabuki theater of democracy where people pretend to go through an electoral process that doesn't really give us any more choice than the Soviet Union's electoral process, where the party would pick the candidates and tell you who to vote for. And, there's nobody in this country that I talk to who believes that their voices are audible in Washington, D.C. And, and we've seen this corrupt merger of state and corporate power that's led by the military-industrial complex. Now involves the oil industry, the pharmaceutical industry. In fact, when Eisenhower issued that warning, everybody remembers the paragraph in which he described the emergence of the military-industrial complex. But the next paragraph, he says, and part of that is the federal scientific bureaucracy that will make science the slave to industry, the mercantile ambitions of the industry, and will pervert science and make it a tool for control. We've seen all that happen, and lastly with COVID. And I think it's the predictable outcome of letting corporations capture the agencies that are supposed to regulate them.
People listening to this would say one of the things that you can do is defund the money printer, and this is why there's such big proponents of Bitcoin, because it's a open, permissionless, transparent form of money which cannot be debased. I know you've covered it before, but and you're now at a Bitcoin event, but what does Bitcoin actually mean to you?
Well, I've told this story before that I was not really curious about Bitcoin. My kids talked about it all the time. My kids are very entrepreneurial and very curious, and they were, it was cutting edge for them. This is the future. But I didn't pay any attention into the trucker strike in Ottawa when I saw the Canadian government go in and shut down all the truckers' bank accounts. These were people who were never convicted of a crime, never charged with a crime, but the Canadian government used AI, facial recognition, and surveillance technologies to identify the participants in a protest that was peaceful, that was like Woodstock. It was, they were exercising a right that we all assume that we have, which is the right to petition, to assemble. And their bank accounts were shut, and they couldn't pay their mortgages. They couldn't pay the gas, the petroleum for the diesel for their trucks. They couldn't leave. They couldn't buy food for their children. I had a friend who's one of those truckers who was threatened with jail because he couldn't pay the court-ordered alimony. So I recognized at that point that transactional freedom was important as freedom of expression, because we have freedom of expression, but if the government then can punish you by shutting down your bank accounts without even charging you with a crime, they have the ultimate power to turn us into slaves. And, if they shut down your food supply, they throw you out of your home, they starve your children. If you say something they don't like, that's the end. So, and every power that government takes, it will, the rule is it will ultimately be abused to the maximum extent feasible. And the other rule is that nobody ever complied their way out of totalitarianism. And, and Bitcoin to me, I started looking at that and saying, here is transactional freedom is critical. And Bitcoin is the answer to that, because nobody controls it. It's this incredibly elegant solution that gives us transactional freedom, that allows you to, and freedom all over the world. You can transact it in places. You know, I have a friend in Gaza who I was trying to send money to recently and can't leave, you know, and is starving. And I was trying to send money and couldn't. There's no PayPal. There's no Venmo there. There's no bank accounts. And, you know, the one way you could do it was through digital currency because you can do it through an app.
So policy-wise, you would defend the right to own Bitcoin?
They should own it, you know.
Self-custody wallets?
Self-custody wallets, self-custody nodes, you know, and people, you know, I'm for freedom. And Bitcoin is, you know, for transactional freedom, that's the most elegant solution.
All right, a couple more questions before we finish up. Another issue that's really important to the people who listen to this, that they'd love to know your opinion on. If you were to become president, there's 3 specific people that people have an interest in presidents' opinions on and whether they would pardon them. It's Julian Assange, who I've interviewed, his brother, father and wife, Edward Snowden, and someone called Ross Ulbricht. I don't know if you know him. Have you expressed your feelings on what you would do with regards to these?
Yeah, I'm going to pardon Assange and Snowden on day one. I am going to very carefully look at Ross Ulbricht's case.
Okay.
And if I determine that Ross Ulbricht was that his sentence, which seemed to be a very punitive sentence, that sentence was not appropriate for the crime that he committed, but was instead a signal to Bitcoin or to cryptocurrencies, then I will pardon him as well. And I will make that determination within weeks of getting elected.
Thank you for joining us in this enlightening discussion about America's pressing issues. We've traversed through a landscape of health concerns, political challenges, and the potential of technology to reshape our freedoms. Remember, the journey towards change begins with awareness and dialogue. Stay tuned for more insightful conversations, and don't forget to share your thoughts and join us in exploring solutions for a healthier, more democratic, and technologically empowered future. If you'd like to watch another podcast recap, you can find them here. Help our channel find more people by liking this video and subscribing to us for more videos like this every week.